All right, everyone. This is Paul Singh, the market speculator. Hope everyone is having a great weekend this May 8th. We've got weekend report. Comes every other week. Every week that this doesn't come out, we do a coffee with Paul. That's going to come out next week, so be on the lookout for the link to that. Today, I'm going to talk about what's going on in the market, the indexes, the leading stocks in each of those indexes, point out a few other stocks, go over current bulls alerts, and then we will talk about the summer swing trading bootcamp that starts in about a week. I'll go over what's going to be in it, and then we can get on our way for the rest of the weekend. So let's take a look here. Let's start with SPY. We use a top-down approach. We start with the indexes, then get into the stocks and the setups. SPY looking fantastic in terms of trend here. A little shaky here, which, as we look at the chart here, it doesn't look so bad. But we know as we're watching the indexes, watching some of the stocks, even though the indexes aren't really showing it, remember the indexes are weighted towards a certain specific area of stocks, that overall the market was looking pretty shaky, and maybe it still is a little bit. But the index itself, SPY is at all-time highs. I always like to, you guys know, I always like to look at RSP, which is the equal weighted SPY. And if we look at that, wow, that is even stronger than SPY itself. And we look in here, we can see some of the stocks that make it up, and it's actually doing pretty good here. Now, if we look at the Qs, I got the wrong ticker there. If we look at the Qs here, a little weaker. The Qs are not at all-time highs and got hit harder, whereas we're looking at SPY, didn't look so bad. We can see here the Qs got hit really hard last week, not even close to highs here. We're seeing weakness in certain areas, especially areas that were 2020 momentum movers, like software, like the at-home stuff like Zoom, like electric. So a lot of these areas that have been high flyers have been weak. We got a nice little bounce to end the week. Now, coming into the new week, we want to see if we get continuation there. I'll actually pull up IGV real quick. This is the software ETF, and you can look at this and see this is even weaker than the Qs. And if you want to see some negative divergence, notice that the Qs made an all-time high right here, pulled back. If we look at IGV, software, which is obviously within the Qs, tech-related, this never even got up to its all-time high. So a negative divergence here, and then weaker in here. We are seeing some decent bounces. If I was to pull up, some of the software stocks that I track, we see some nice bounces on Friday here. But now we need to see continuation. So I'm going to be watching that very closely. Is this continuation? Or is it a dead cat bounce where we get a little bounce and then we're going to get more weakness? Now, technical pattern, it looks like, if I were to put odds on this, weakness is more likely. We've got the lower high here. We've got this bounce and we're lagging the other indexes, other tech. So doesn't mean that's going to happen, but I'm watching for, I'm very interested in this area, do we start to bounce and then fail at resistance levels? If that happens, I might initiate shorts. We'll talk a little about that more when we get into a few stocks like Zoom. IWM, interesting that this was weaker than the Qs and SPY a little while ago, but now is looking pretty healthy, and Qs look weaker. And you can see here IWM bouncing nicely above the 50-day moving average. So that's where we are in terms of the overall indexes. Now let's take a look at some of the leaders. I usually go over the top 10 here. We'll probably go over 5 here. Let's start with the Qs. eBay, big leader here in the Qs, but notice overall, not so much. So this is actually one of my favorite setups. And when we go over some of the bulls positions, you're going to see a similar pattern here. During earnings season, which is what we're in right now, I love when we see overreactions to earnings. And we saw that with eBay. The big gap down immediately reversed, and now here has remounted the 50-day moving average. I haven't been interested in eBay for a while, but now this is a setup that I love. So watching eBay very closely, let's take a look at Amgen. Amgen, same pattern. You're going to see a lot of this. Gap down. When you see these gap downs, you think there's bad news in the stock, and bad news did come out that day. When it tends to happen, it's an overreaction news that's really not that big. So a lot of people will start shorting it, but these things often will bounce. And we see that with Amgen here. Packaged foods has been very strong. And we see Kraft here, kind of a boring company, right? But it's moving like a momentum stock. The thing has gone, the last few months from 38 to 48. So definitely one that you should be watching, not only Kraft, but a lot of the packaged food stuff. So if you pull up some of these stocks here, GIS is a good one. Campbell's, who would think to trade Campbell's, but it has been a leader here. You can see where it was. Well, maybe this one, not so much. I got that mixed up with something else. Hasn't really been a leader. Now, into tech, communications, and semiconductors, we looked at software as being very weak. Within tech, communications and semiconductors have been strong. And you can see TMUS, T-Mobile, look at this, at all-time highs, obviously very different than what software is doing. So, we tend to think of technology together, but obviously there's a lot of different moving parts in technology. Telecom has been very strong. So TMUS, definitely pay attention to T-Mobile. PCAR, farm and heavy construction. This has been, this stock here, not really doing a whole lot. This week was strong, obviously, it's considering it's the fifth strongest in the Qs. But overall, the pattern's okay. But these areas, industrials, we're in 3M. Metals like steel, copper, these things have been very strong. So I'm not really paying attention to this stock, but this area is definitely one to be watching. Cisco, like I said, communications have been very strong. And this is another good exercise to do on the weekends, is even if you're not interested in these stocks, just taking a look at what led these indexes will give you an idea of what areas to be watching, not only stocks, but the areas you want to be watching. So that's the NASDAQ. Let's actually quickly look at what were some of the weak spots in here as well. And what we were saying, look at this. What were the weakest stocks within the Qs? Software, 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 software. So a lot of software there. So something to be, again, paying attention to. That software, which has been a leader through 2020, has been really weak recently. All right, let's look at the S&P 500. Oil and gas, energy has been very strong here. We have Valero. This has been on our watch list, and you're going to see when we go into Bulls Alerts. We are in ERX right now, which is the energy ETF. So, and what's leading SPY right now over the last 5 days? Energy stocks here. So here's, I don't know how I got to Valero there, but here's, let me make sure I got this right. 5 day. Okay, yeah, BKR #1, and look how strong that pattern is here. And notice here, even though there's been a nice push, there's a lot of room to the upside on a lot of these things. So BKR, I mentioned steel, and look at this, NUE, look at this thing flying. IT here, very strong. The stock actually was not even on my radar, but nice breakout, definitely one to watch. SLB, oil and gas. And notice here, we're going to see the same pattern over and over again. Oil and gas, I mentioned copper before, and here's FCX, very strong. We took profits in this one last week. Maybe we should have stayed in it because it's still on fire. But you're seeing here a lot of the same stuff. Now let's go to the small caps. And again here, BKR. We talked about industrial metals. Here's TECK. And you're seeing these same themes. Energy, industrial metals, steel, and then within tech, what's moving? Communications and semis. X steel, NUE steel. We've got IT. We've got, all this is steel and oil and gas. So that's really what we want to be paying attention to now going into the next week. Current positions here. Here's ERX. I was just talking about energy here. We took a position in ERX, which is doing very well. We were entered in the 26s. It's up to 28. Expecting a breakout here. A lot of momentum in energy. If this thing breaks this range here, which it made a high in 2021, we could really see it fly. And look at where it was pre-pandemic. So there's a lot of room to the upside if this area really starts to move. We entered Microsoft here. This was an earnings gap down continuation, but then held the 50-day moving average, put in a nice bullish engulfing candle. That's the trigger here. Now the expectation here is that it will fill the gap here around 261. Very similar pattern in 3M, gap down reversal, and now is back at highs here. So 3M, very strong. And then finally, well, that's it. 3M, we've been trading very cautiously, so only 3 positions right now. These areas that I talked about, I really like. And if we get a little bit of a dip at the beginning of the week, I might look to add in steel, in copper, in oil, in more in energy, and in these specific tech areas that have been strong. All right, let's go over a few stocks here before we get into the summer class. Here we have Google. Now, big tech was very weak during earnings season. And when I say very weak, I'm not talking about the numbers, because actually with almost every one of these big tech stocks, the numbers were actually pretty good. Most of them beat estimates. Most have had to have good guidance, but the earnings reactions were bad. If we look at Apple, we've been talking about this a lot. Apple had fantastic earnings, and look what happened after that. But Google and Facebook did the opposite. They had good numbers, but their earnings reactions were really good. They pulled back with the market after that, but now they are looking very strong. So I like Google a lot. It has remounted the 9 EMA. Facebook is a very similar pattern here. Breakout, pullback, held the 9, looks very strong. So watching Facebook closely, and you guys know we got into Microsoft here. Still watching airlines. I got stopped out a little under break even on UIL before. So no harm, no foul. Still watching it very closely. And if you can remount the 50-day moving average, had an earnings gap down, but their guidance was really good. So I still like airlines. We know the themes here: opening up of the economy, getting vaccines. People are going to start to travel. Numbers have already picked up quite a bit within the airlines. So looking good here. I'm watching this week. Does it remount the 50-day moving average? A couple other stocks here. Square had really good blowout earnings. Didn't break out as strong as I had hoped. It went up 4%. But I'd like to see continuation here. If it can continue off this, and you can see the trend here, it gets really back on trend. It has good earnings, has good numbers. So we'll be keeping that out on Square. And then a couple of weak stocks here. Zoom, now kind of the opposite of what we said about airlines. So airlines, the theme of reopening of the economy, of people getting out, is good for airlines, bad for Zoom. The idea that people are going to go back to work instead of working from home. A lot of companies, it's all over the news now. A lot of companies, like especially the big banks, Goldman Sachs talked about it. A few other big companies that they don't want people working from home. They want the networking, people working in the office. So we're seeing more of that. Obviously, that's not good for Zoom. Also, they have competitors. They've had competitors, Microsoft, making that big push in this space as well. And you can see here, after this huge pandemic run in Zoom, when just about everybody had used Zoom, either for work or for play, now this does kind of look like a topping pattern. It has already gone from 580 down to 295. And if this thing breaks this range, it could really push down before it enters this support range right in here around 175. So there's a good over 100 points here potential for a short in Zoom. So we'll be watching that closely. Now, it's tough to get in front of get short on any of the blockchain stuff, but Riot, this does have that topping kind of look here. If we were to break this range and maybe get down to 32, 33, the 200-day moving average and this price action support is right in here around 21. So maybe a good 10 points for a potential short there in Riot. I'm not saying to do it, but it does look very toppish there. All right. So those are a few of the many stocks that we're watching heading into next week. Now let's talk about the summer swing trading course. Next week, starting on Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. Then we'll have a bonus mentorship class after that, which I don't have scheduled yet. But we're going to talk about summer trading. Summer trading can be very different than normal trading. Things tend to slow down, but there are really good opportunities. So we're going to go over strategies that work really good over summer. On the first day, we're going to go over a foundation of swing trading for those of you who don't have a good foundation, the stuff you need to know going into summer. Then we're going to take historic summer patterns. So I've studied this stuff very closely. We're going to go take the last 20 or 30 years, go over the patterns that tend to play out over summer, and also some outliers, some things that tend to happen with certain areas that really run over summer. So we'll talk about that on the first day. On the second day, we'll really get into the weeds and talk about some specific stuff. On the third day, we're going to get into good option strategies, at least 3. I may add a few more option strategies that really work well when we get in a range bound market, when things tend to slow down. We'll go over some option strategies for two things. One, for range bound action, and two, the areas that are moving, because there's always a few areas that go outside of the market. How do we play those momentum areas? So we'll go over some of those option strategies. And then also we'll talk about earnings, because we're coming out of an earnings season in summer, the earnings season we're in right now. And then in July, the new earnings season starts. So we will definitely go over some earnings strategies as well. And then on the fourth day, it'll be a mentorship class. We'll put this stuff into practice, tons of practical applications. And then, of course, anything you guys want to talk about, question and answer. We'll go over a ton of examples. So you can sign up at Bulls on Wall Street Summer Swing Trading Masterclass link. And there's a really good deal where you get the swing report as well. The swing report alone on the monthly costs like $2,300 a year, but you'll get the class and the report for like less than half that. So, all right, guys, next week, if you're in that class, I will see you Sunday. Otherwise, Coffee and Stocks with Paul next Saturday. I'll see you guys. Hopefully we have a great trading week, and I will see you guys next Saturday.